Clockwork, or All Wound Up, by Phillip Pullman. Gretel nearly fainted, but she was a brave girl, and she had seen what lay in Karl's hand. It was the heavy iron key of the clock tower. With her mind in a whirl, she was still able to guess part of what had happened, if not all of it, and she realized what Karl must have done with the prince. She took the key from his hand and ran out of the inn and across the square to the great dark tower. She turned the key in the lock and began to climb for the second time that night. But these stairs were higher and steeper than those in Fritz's lodging, and they were darker too, and there were bats that flitted through the air, and the wind groaned across the mouths of the mighty bells and made their ropes swing dismally. But up and up she climbed, until she came to the lowest of the clock chambers, where the oldest and simplest part of the mechanism was housed. In the darkness she felt her way around the huge iron cogwheels, the thick ropes, the stiff metal figures of St. Wolfgang and the devil, but she didn't find the prince, and so she climbed on. She ran her hands over the Archangel Michael, and in his armour he reminded her of Sir Ironsoul, and she took her hands away quickly. She felt up the side of a figure in a painted robe, and her fingers explored his face, until she realized that it was the skull face of Death, and she took her hands away from him too. Time is running out, like sand in the hourglass, which is another kind of clock after all. Will Gretel get to the prince in time? She's in time now. She's right inside the clock, at the very heart of time. She'll get there. The higher she climbed, the more noise the clock made, a ticking and a tocking, a clicking and a creaking, a whirring and a rumbling. She clambered over struts and levers and chains and cogwheels, and the further she went, the more she felt as if she too were becoming part of the clock. And all the time she peered into the dark and felt around and listened with all her might. Finally she clambered up through a trapdoor into the very topmost chamber, and found silver moonlight shining in on such a complexity of mechanical parts that she could make no sense of them at all. At the same moment she heard a little song. It was the prince calling to her. Dazzled by the moonlight, Gretel blinked and rubbed her eyes, and there was Prince Florian, with the very last of his clockwork life, singing like a nightingale. "Oh, you poor cold thing! He's fastened you so tightly I can't undo the bolts. Oh, that was wicked! He was going to leave you here and run away, I'm sure. What's the matter with you, Prince Florian? I'm sure you'd tell me if you could. I think you're ill, that's what the trouble is. I think you need warming up. You're too cold. But that's hardly surprising, seeing what they've done with you. Never mind. If I can't get you down, I'll stay up here with you. I can wrap my cloak around us both. You'll see. We're better off up here in any case, if you ask me. The things that have been going on. You'd never believe it. I won't tell you now, because you wouldn't go to sleep. I'll tell you in the morning. I promise. Are you comfortable, Prince Florian? You don't have to speak if you don't want to. You can just nod." Prince Florian nodded, and Gretel tucked her cloak around them and held the little boy in her arms as she went to sleep. The last thing she thought was, "He is getting warmer, I'm sure. I can feel it." The morning came. All through the town, visitors and townsfolk alike were getting dressed and eating their breakfasts hungrily, eager to see the new figure in the famous clock. The snow-laden rooftops glittered and gleamed in the bright blue air, and the fragrance of roasting coffee and fresh-baked rolls drifted through the streets. And as time drew on towards 10 o'clock, a strange rumour went round the town. The clockmaker's apprentice had been found dead. Murdered, what was more. The police called Herr Ringelmann in to look at the body. The old clockmaker was shocked and dismayed to see his apprentice lying dead. "The poor boy! It was his day of fame. Whatever can have happened? What a disaster! Who can have done this terrible thing?" "Do you recognize this figure, Herr Ringelmann?" said the sergeant. "This Clockwork Knight?" "No, I've never seen it before in my life. Ah, is that Karl's blood on its sword?" I'm afraid so. Do you think he could have made this figure? No, certainly not. The figure he made is up in the clock. That's the tradition, you know, Sergeant. He was going to fit his new figure in the clock on the last evening of his apprenticeship, just as I did in my time. Carl was a good boy. A little quiet and morose, perhaps, but a good apprentice. I'm sure he did what he was supposed to do, and we'll see his new figure when it comes out in a minute or so. What a sad occasion, instead of a happy one. The new figure will have to be his memorial, poor boy.